For as long as the Galactic Council had maintained its records, humanity was viewed as a gentle anomaly among the stars. To the aggressive reptilian factions of the Outer Rim or the hyper-logical machine intelligences of the core, the Terrans were a species that seemed to have outgrown the harsh, evolutionary drive for dominance. They did not build world-cracking dreadnoughts, nor did they establish sweeping military sectors designed to bleed their neighbors dry. Instead, human vessels were celebrated across the cosmos as masterpieces of aesthetic engineering: sleek, shimmering transport liners, deep space research modules, and vibrant agricultural stations that brought life to once barren rocks. Humanity had earned a reputation as the galaxy's premier curators, historians, and artists. They traded in ancient philosophy, exported complex tapestries of music, and spent generations terraforming worlds not for strategic leverage, but to create vast planetary parks. Yet, beneath this cultural elegance lay a peculiar quirk that foreign intelligence agencies could never quite decipher. In human literature, architecture, and folklore, there was a recurring, almost obsessive motif: the dragon. From the neon-lit spires of Neo-Tokyo on Earth to the subterranean habitats of Mars, images of scaled, serpentine leviathans dominated human art. When alien diplomats asked about this fixation, human scholars merely smiled, describing it as a harmless remnant of their primitive mythology, a psychological symbol of chaos and untamed nature that their ancestors had conquered long before reaching the stars. To the rest of the galaxy, this explanation made perfect sense. It was the classic behavior of a soft species that had forgotten the reality of tooth and claw, romanticizing monsters because they had spent centuries living in safety. They were viewed as harmless custodians of history, safe to ignore, and entirely ripe for conquest by anyone with the strength to take what they owned. The Xylos Hegemony did not believe in art, and they certainly did not care for mythology. As an apex empire that had swallowed 3 adjacent star systems through sheer brutal efficiency, their society was built on a singular, unshakable doctrine: the strong inherit the void, and the weak serve as fuel. To War Master Kalen, the supreme commander of the Xylos Vanguard, the Sol system was nothing more than a poorly defended treasure trove. Human space was rich in rare isotopes, heavily terraformed garden worlds, and a massive civilian workforce that could easily be transitioned into planetary labor camps. Kalen's analysts had spent months reviewing Terran defense networks, concluding that Earth's orbital defenses were laughably inadequate, consisting mostly of localized police cutters and automated satellite arrays designed to deflect stray space debris rather than repel a coordinated military invasion. On a standard galactic rotation, the shadow finally fell. Without a formal declaration of war or a single diplomatic transmission, the space surrounding Earth warped and fractured as the primary Xylos battle fleet dropped out of FTL travel. Over 500 heavy cruisers, bristling with plasma lances and antimatter siege cannons, formed a suffocating black grid across the sky. The sheer gravitational distortion of their arrival caused the upper atmosphere to shimmer with artificial auroras. From the bridge of his flagship, the Iron Sovereign, War Master Kalen looked down at the blue and green jewel of Earth with cold satisfaction. He activated a system-wide broadcast, overriding every civilian communication network from the Moon to the surface. His voice, layered with mechanical amplification, boomed into the homes of billions, demanding unconditional surrender, the immediate dissolution of the Terran government, and total annexation. To Kalen, it wasn't a battle, it was an eviction notice. What happened next confounded the Xylos military staff and cemented their belief in human cowardice. Instead of a frantic mobilization, instead of civilian panic or a desperate, suicidal charge from Earth's meager orbital cutters, a profound and eerie quiet washed over the Sol system. Within minutes of Kalen's ultimatum, the premier of the United Terran Council appeared on the central viewing screens of the Iron Sovereign. The human leader looked remarkably calm, showing no signs of the sweating terror that usually accompanied leaders facing a Xylos invasion. Without shedding a single tear or raising his voice in protest, the premier delivered a brief, chillingly precise directive. All civilian sectors were to remain calm, and all planetary defense grids were ordered to stand down immediately. To the Xylos commanders, this was the ultimate validation of their doctrine. They laughed openly on their bridges as automated human defense platforms powered down, their targeting arrays going dark as they slipped into standby mode. Terran authorities actively cooperated, opening commercial docking bays to allow the alien troop transports to land without a single shot being fired. Within hours, heavy armored Xylos columns were marching through the streets of Earth's major capitals. Human citizens watched from sidewalks and high-rise windows, their expressions unreadable, entirely devoid of the violent resistance the hegemony was accustomed to encountering on conquered worlds. The humans simply stood by, offering no friction, quietly complying with every bureaucratic demand of their new occupiers. It seemed humanity had chosen survival over honor, submitting to the yoke of the hegemony like sheep accepting a new shepherd. As the occupation entered its second week, the Xylos forces began a comprehensive geological and technological audit of the planet to log prizes of war. It was during a routine orbital sweep using deep-crust neutrino scanners that the hegemony's science division flagged a massive anomaly. Deep beneath the crushing, miles-thick ice sheets of Antarctica, localized sensors detected an inexplicable energy signature. It was a massive, concentrated pulse that defied standard classification, neither purely radioactive nor standard plasma, but a rhythmic, hyper-dense gravitational resonance that thrummed like a low, mechanical heartbeat. The signature was colossal, spanning several miles in length, and historical dating matrices indicated that it predated modern human civilization by millions of years. When Xylos intelligence officers confronted the local human administrative transition team about the coordinates, the reaction was instantaneous and uncharacteristically frantic. For the first time since the invasion began, the calm facade of the human representatives shattered. Terran officials broke protocol, begging the Xylos commanders to redirect their surveys and leave the southern continent untouched. They offered vast resource concessions from Mars and mining rights to the asteroid belt, pleading with the occupiers to seal the region permanently. In their panicked transmissions, the humans kept referring to the subglacial coordinates by a singular, ominous designation, the Lair. This sudden desperation only inflamed the curiosity and arrogance of the hegemony. War Master Kalen reasoned that if the weaklings of Earth were this terrified of an ancient site, it had to contain a hidden weapon of mass destruction or a technological relic of unimaginable value, a prize he fully intended to seize for himself. Ignoring every human warning, War Master Kalen personally oversaw the expedition to the frozen wastes of Antarctica. A specialized fleet of heavy demolition transports was deployed to the skies above the coordinates, positioning massive, strategic fusion charges directly over the thickest part of the ice shelf. The human population could only watch in silent horror as the countdown concluded. The subsequent detonations did not shatter the planet, but the sheer concentrated heat vaporized millions of tons of ancient ice in a matter of seconds, creating a massive, steaming chasm that plunged deep into the dark bedrock of the Earth. As the smoke and superheated steam cleared, the true scale of the breach was revealed. The moment the final layer of bedrock was cracked open, a violent, invisible shockwave rippled outward from the chasm. It wasn't a kinetic explosion, but a massive spike of electromagnetic and gravitational interference that instantly blanketed the entire solar system. On the bridge of the Iron Sovereign in high orbit, primary tactical displays flickered wildly, shifting to static before resetting. Across the planet, civilian grids and military sensors stuttered, experiencing a synchronized moment of severe distortion. It was as if the planet itself had let out a massive, subterranean gasp. The Xylos engineering teams down in the chasm reported that their drilling equipment had ceased to function, entirely drained of power by an immense, unseen localized vacuum. Kalen, thrilled by the sheer potency of the energy spike, ordered his elite shock troops into the dark abyss, eager to claim whatever weapon lay waiting in the depths. The vanguard of Xylos shock troops, accompanied by heavy scientific drones, descended into the subterranean cavern. What they discovered blew past all expectations of a standard military bunker or technology vault. The cavern was titanic, a space carved out of volcanic rock that stretched for miles, illuminated only by the eerie, pulsing amber glow of strange conduits lining the walls. At the center of this underworld lay the source of the energy signal, a biomechanical entity so immense it defied comprehension. It was miles long, its form seamlessly integrated into the very bedrock of the continent, patterned with thick, overlapping plates of a dark, synthetic alloy that uncannily resembled shimmering, prehistoric scales. It possessed a distinctly serpentine silhouette, coiling through the earth like a frozen leviathan. But the most jarring element of the scene was the presence of hundreds of human scientists. They had not fled the invasion, instead, they were gathered on massive catwalks surrounding the entity, frantically working at terminals that were powered by independent, kinetic generators. As the Xylos soldiers pushed their way into the facility with weapons drawn, they realized the humans weren't trying to activate the machine. They were desperately pumping cryogenic fluids and heavy dampening fields into the core of the structure. The lead human researcher turned to the Xylos commander, his face pale with a mixture of rage and sheer terror. "You fools," the scientist whispered, his voice trembling as he pointed at the fluctuating readouts. "We didn't hide this from you to protect ourselves. We were keeping it asleep. We have spent 10,000 years trying to ensure it would never wake up." The Xylos commander merely laughed, brushing the human scientist aside with a heavy, armored hand. To a warrior of the hegemony, the idea of fearing a dormant pile of metal and wires was absurd. He stepped up to the primary catwalk, admiring the sleek, terrifying beauty of the synthetic scales. Believing he could interface with the machine and subvert its programming to serve the Xylos Empire, the commander ordered his tech drones to inject a compliance virus directly into one of the main power nodes. The moment the alien probes pierced the synthetic hull, the amber conduits lining the cavern walls instantly turned a violent, blinding crimson. A sound echoed through the subterranean depths, a low, mechanical rumble that vibrated through the bones of every creature present. It was a sound that simulated a massive, mechanical inhalation. The dragon had drawn its first breath in 10 million years. Instantly, the environment changed. The entity didn't turn on or display a boot sequence. Instead, it began to draw immense amounts of ambient energy from everything in its vicinity. The plasma rifles in the hands of the Xylos soldiers sparked and went dead. The heavy scientific drones crashed to the floor, their batteries completely drained. High above the atmosphere, the Iron Sovereign and the rest of the orbital fleet shivered as their main reactor cores plummeted in efficiency. Their power literally pulled down toward the southern pole of the planet. The creature was waking, and its hunger for energy was insatiable. The Xylos commander frantically ordered a retreat, but it was already too late. Antarctica was merely the trigger for an automated system-wide sequence that had remained dormant for eons. As the central entity beneath the ice fully activated, a synchronized chain reaction rippled across the entire Sol system. In deep space, far beyond the orbit of Earth, the seemingly random and chaotic configurations of the asteroid belt began to shift. Camouflaged rocks cracked open, shedding millions of tons of space dust to reveal sleek, biomechanical frameworks hidden within. Dead moons that human miners had spent centuries working around began to alter their orbits, their crusts splitting to unveil titanic, coiled structures buried deep in their mantles. Thousands of similar entities, all sharing the same serpentine design, woke up in perfect unison across the void. They formed an interconnected, glowing web of crimson energy that linked Earth, Mars, and the outer planets. The Xylos fleet found themselves trapped inside a massive, system-wide cage of raw power. These entities did not communicate via radio, nor did they display any recognizable military hierarchy. They operated with the terrifying, instinctual coordination of a hive of apex predators that had just been disturbed. The universe had long assumed that humanity was a lone, defenseless species occupying an open system. They had no idea that the Sol system itself was a massive, dormant weapon, and the Xylos had just walked directly into the jaw of the trap. War Master Kalen, frantic and completely stripped of his former arrogance, ordered his fleet to fire upon the nearest entities. The Iron Sovereign unleashed a devastating salvo of plasma lances, targeting a coiled leviathan that had emerged from the moon's shadow. But the results were catastrophic. The entities did not possess shields in the traditional sense. Instead, their synthetic scales acted as massive energy sinks, absorbing the incoming plasma fire and using that very power to accelerate their movements. They did not fire lasers or missiles. Their method of warfare was purely kinetic, primal, and absolute. Moving at significant fractions of the speed of light, the entities swarmed the Xylos lines like a pack of wolves cutting through a flock. A single, miles-long serpentine entity slammed directly through the center of a Xylos dreadnought, its kinetic force tearing the heavy cruiser completely in half before moving on to the next target. Another entity coiled its massive, shifting body around a cluster of supply ships, crushing their armored hulls down to compacted spheres of scrap metal within seconds. The vacuum of space was filled with silent, violent explosions of fire and debris as the hegemony's proudest invasion force was systematically hunted down and entirely dismantled. Within less than 20 minutes of the awakening, 500 warships were reduced to drifting fields of radioactive wreckage. The invasion was over, not through a hard-fought war, but through a total, effortless slaughter. In the quiet aftermath of the destruction, a solitary Xylos escape pod drifted among the burning remains of the fleet, carrying War Master Kalen. His systems were entirely dark, save for an emergency channel that had been forcefully overridden by Earth's high command. The viewing screen flickered to life, revealing the calm, unblinking face of the Terran Premier. Kalen, bloodied and trembling with a horror he had never known, stared into the screen. What are those things?" he rasped. "You told the galaxy they were just stories. You told us you were peaceful curators." The Premier looked at him, his eyes holding an ancient, heavy sorrow. "We didn't lie to you, War Master. We are peaceful. We love art, philosophy, and creation. But you fundamentally misunderstood our mythology. You assumed that dragon was a god we worshipped, or a beast that our ancestors had killed." The screen shifted to show a tactical feed of the massive entities smoothly recoiling, returning to their hidden lairs within the planets and moons, slipping back into their long camouflage. The truth is much older. Our ancestors didn't worship the dragon. They built it. It is the final, ultimate defense directive of our species, designed to erase any threat that demonstrates the intent to genocide our people. We spent millennia trading in art and keeping our military history buried because we knew that once the dragon wakes, it does not stop until everything in its path is consumed. You thought you were conquering a playground, Kalen. You didn't realize you were walking through a graveyard, and you just woke the monster that dug the graves. The transmission cut to black, leaving Earth to return to its peaceful silence, while a terrified galaxy learned to never, ever disturb the cradle of humanity again. If you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe my channel.